Welcome to the From Pain to Purpose radio show. I'm your host, Eva Fulton. In this show, we explore the incredible journeys of resilience, healing, and transformation. In each episode, we will sit down with individuals who have faced unimaginable struggles and turned their pain into power, heartbreak into hope, and their challenges into meaningful change and finding new purpose in life. Through candid conversations and inspiring stories, we will uncover how pain, whether emotional, physical, mental, or spiritual, can be the catalyst for profound growth and a deeper sense of purpose. So if you are looking for motivation, insight, and real stories of triumph over adversity, you're in the right place. Let's get started on this journey from pain to purpose. Let's give veterans a voice through Military Broadcast Talk.
Hey, welcome everybody. Welcome to the From Pain to Purpose radio show on Military Broadcast Radio, letting our veterans' voices be heard. Today is Saturday, August 22nd, the year of our Lord, 2026, and it's hot in Texas. Hot, hot, hot. It's 106 today. Can you believe it? Last weekend I was on a camping trip with my daughter and her fiance and a soon-to-be stepson. We went tubing down the Guadalupe. The water was refreshingly cool because it was coming out of the dam from Canyon Lake. So, you know, when you are enjoying cool water like that and just relaxing, you know, the memories are there. And I mean, I feel very blessed that whenever I took my kids out camping like that, it was, you know, at least once a year we tried to enjoy doing something like the Guadalupe. But it also is going to hit home on the culture side of things, because those of you who grew up in Texas, went to colleges in Texas, you know exactly what I mean about getting on the Guadalupe or any of those rivers down there going tubing always meant alcohol. So today's episode is going to talk about alcohol. Hey, MJ says, camping. Hello, sweets. Hey, MJ. We need to chat. We need to, we need to have a conversation. So anyways, you know, camping is one of those things I've enjoyed. I've been enjoying my summer, doing lots of RV project and getting it all refurbished. I have some trips coming up pretty soon. I know you guys are watching and watching the evolution of the RV. It is taking shape. I'm not going to take the RV, I don't think, for this trip, but I have camo britches. Yep, I use that word. I have camo. Guess what that means? I'm going to go do something interesting that I haven't ever done before. At the end of September, I'm going to Wyoming, going to go hunting. So that'll be new. I enjoy learning new things. And part of it, you know, is that side of me. Maybe it's because I'm a veteran. I grew up with my dad hunting. Mom did a little bit too when we were little. But I want to know. I want to be able to take care of me and mine. You know, if the shit hits the fan, yes, let's be real. If the shit hits the fan and I've got to feed my family, I need to know how to take care of my family, because I don't have a spouse who's going to hunt and take care of me. MJ says, yes, ma'am. I need to make sure I can eat. And I'm not a vegetarian. So I'll be honest about that. I like my protein. And I like buffalo. I like bison. I like game meat, but I want to know how to be able to go take care of it and myself. I'm not afraid to learn that. Yeah, obviously I've been bow hunt. Well, I haven't gone bow hunting, but I have, you know, done the archery thing, expanding my horizons. And I'm going to use that figurative side of things. I don't need a man to take care of me. Yeah, I don't know too many men who could take care of me, but Yeah, he hasn't come out. MJ says, "Come on up, we'll teach you." All right, we may have to put that in the works. MJ, I told you we got to talk. She says, "Me either. Like it, blood red rare." I do too. Right? Yeah, it's yes. All right, so getting into the topic today, I'm gonna transition and kind of tell a bit more of my personal story of things. If you've read my book, you can see the original cover here. I need to get a poster for the newer cover that came out last year. Same book. MJ says, "Oh, poor man, poor man." Well, I haven't found one strong enough for me yet, so maybe he's out there. Anyways, my second husband, I I don't talk about this public. I haven't really talked about my second husband very publicly. I have many of his family members who are still alive, of course, and but they know that he had an issue as well. Mark was an alcoholic, and it led to some different situations in our marriage. It affected, I believe, our children, my children, even from my first marriage, because I was married twice. I and both men have passed away. We'll leave it that, right? So Mark was my second husband. I grew up next door to his grandparents from about 12 years old. Our lives did this and came back together. And, I loved him dearly. So don't get me wrong. I loved him dearly, but he had an alcohol problem. And it did affect our marriage. It did affect ultimately our family in the very long term because he developed stage 4 liver disease and passed away in July 2015. Can't say that I haven't had my own little challenges with alcohol. Typically, my response when I was going through all of that in the divorce, I'd have my bottle of wine and go paint a room. That was my therapy. And it's funny how we use this language, right? It is the how we describe things. But my therapy was I literally took it out on the wall. Kids were not at home, so I was not affecting anybody else, but just enjoying my bottle of wine. And this was in my house back over in Fort Worth that I flipped. Fortunately, I was very blessed and able to flip it, but rehabbing the home was my therapy. And that's how I started even writing my book, Welcome to My People Garden, because I started working on my own figurative backyard and dealing with the trauma of what I had experienced as the wife of an alcoholic. And, I struggled then and still struggle sometimes talking through it myself that I was the victim of domestic violence. Alcohol played a huge role in the way Mark lived life. It was the Crown and Coke. It was Crown and Coke, right? It wouldn't be just a couple of beers. It would be like the whole 12 pack. Um, I've not been, for me, I get drunk on a glass of wine. I don't and not have ever been a huge alcoholic binger by any means, though alcoholism comes in different shapes and sizes, but it's also a cultural thing. And by that, I mean, I took my daughter and her fiance and little Asher, 5-year-old Asher, and we went to the circus last night. All this candy, all this sugar is out there, and I, started thinking about the shows we're walking through because I kept seeing all these liquor stands, and I'm like, oh man, I get it. I get it. you have all the sugar for the kids and you got all the liquor for the parents. The parents need the liquor because the sugar is going to the kids, and the only way they can deal with the sugared up kids is to drink the alcohol. But in some ways, we in the military culture, this is all just my opinion, my observations. Sorry, People Garden. We've gone from this culture of seeing things handled the way we've grown up, hey, let's go pop one after work. Well, popping one is not popping a firecracker, it's popping the can on a beer, right? Open up a new bottle of whatever your favorite alcohol, is, and whatever you're going to mix it with, whatever. We have had this culture. I remember even when I came back from Desert Storm, everybody was going to the NCO club, or I didn't ever go to the officers club, but it was always about going and getting drunk. That was the answer. Go celebrate, have a beer. Are you miserable? Go drink something. The answer is found in a bottle, and we haven't adopted a culture of figuring out how do we transition the culture side of things to be able to move forward without alcohol being part of the answer. And so that was like really obvious last night. And we think that we're going to move the needle on the 22. Those of you know what I'm talking about, 22 a day or whatever the Disney number is of today, that we have not moved our culture any different than what it was 2,000 years ago. What am I talking about on this? I'm going to read something. So I'm going to substitute a name, and I want you to figure out who am I talking about. John Doe got drunk on wine from his new vineyard and lay uncovered and passed out inside his tent. His son, John, I'm just saying, could be Bill, whatever, found him and told his brothers outside, leading to a well-known family conflict once, John Doe woke up. Anybody figure out who I'm talking about? This is scripture, mind you, right? This is scripture. We have not changed since the days of Noah. I was just reading the paraphrase from Genesis 9:21 through 24. Noah got drunk, passed out in his tent, found his son Ham, found him naked in his tent, and Ham went and told the world Noah was drunk. We as people have not changed, and we're still ratting on each other, and we're still thinking that culture is going to change. And yet, for whatever reason, Noah found the answer in the bottom of a bottle and maybe he didn't go to God with it. So what do we do, right? What do we do as a culture? How do we fix this? Well, my guest today is Russ Blaylock. He reached out. Yeah, y'all think that I'm only the one who's reaching out, talking to people in my People Garden. Sometimes my People Garden reaches out to me. And so Russ is going to join with us. He's going to share his experience on acceptance and finally realizing time is God's time, not mine. Born and raised into the agricultural community of the mid-cities in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, Russ shares his story of riches to rags, resentments to redemption at the lens of his primer. Through the lens of his primer, the gift of addiction. Yes, gift. I told y'all, pain to purpose, right? His rock bottom cultivated a relationship with God, now calling him to community outreach. Russ offers hope for rehabilitation from institutions, addiction of self, fear, and family chaos. And at 50 years old, he believes it's never too late to sit all the way down in the chair in silence so you can hear your higher power's vision for you. Welcome, Russ Blaylock.
The interview of the week is brought to you by Jersey Mike's, a sub above.
Hi, Russ. Welcome to the From Pain to Purpose radio show.
Hey, thank you so much. That was a great intro. I appreciate that. I'm glad to be here.
Good. All right. Well, why don't you tell folks a little bit about yourself?
Okay. Again, I appreciate it, Eva. My name is Russ Blaylock, and it's really kind of strange. Just through you mentioned just kind of who reached out to who, and as I explained before, we both had a mutual friend, and because of that, I kept seeing you pop up on my Facebook, and something called me, said, call this lady, reach out, and just kind of see what she's doing, learn a little bit more about what you're doing for the community. And I did. We had a little conversation, and you're right. Things have not changed for thousands of years, as far as like how we cope with the war at home, the war in our minds, day-to-day living. And yeah, it was a problem for Noah, and it's still a problem for us today. Um, and so it's been my experience, like you said. Ironically, I grew up in the agricultural community. I was born and raised on a nursery, a large plant nursery in Colleyville in the 1980s. And, it's funny because I remember the day that my dad got the bright idea to not only try to grow oak trees and rose bushes and sell those, but he went through kind of a period of time where he thought he would start his own vineyard as well. And, in Alcoholics Anonymous, one of the things that I've heard is they say that man's had a problem with alcohol since we first learned how to step on a grape. And
Right.
it's true. It's true in so many ways. And basically, I grew up in that kind of a lifestyle, which was a great childhood as a kid until I got old enough to realize that things were not happy inside the house. I had 45 acres to roam of a nursery and get into my own head, my own play space as a kid. Other kids really envied what I had, but I couldn't stay out there in the fields all day long. And when I would come home at night, I knew that mom was unhappy and dad was staying out in the office on the property. And it all kind of began from there. And, I identified the problem as the drink. And like a lot of kids who grow up in a household like that, I was determined I am not going to be that when I grow
Yeah.
up, and the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And the addiction problem, it's a family disease. But as you've kind of mentioned, and like the tenet that we believe is that it is a disease of mind, body, and spirit. So
Yeah.
my goals now are just to try to share what I've learned through the hard knocks of life, and I've had many, and try to offer any help or any guidance to anybody who's struggling with it.
Okay. Well, feel free. Where's a good place to start in that journey then? Is it identification, acknowledgement, acceptance? You know, where do you begin in that self-reflection side of things?
Yeah. I think that, the main thing is when you're dealing, let's just talk about the individual who may be watching your show right now.
Yeah.
We've
And they could
all
be
faced,
veteran or non-veteran alike, right? That
yeah, in full disclosure, I am not a veteran, and I really honor the people who have had what it took to go and serve our country. And just from the aspect of what I see in the rooms of recovery, we see a lot of veterans. We see a lot of veterans that feel like they've been trained to encounter anything and everything. And when they come home and they have to deal with themselves in their own head, this may end up being something that they ask themselves: do I have a problem? Am I relying on something in a bottle to cope? And the old saying is that if you have to ask if you have a problem, you probably do. But we don't like to announce anybody to be an alcoholic. But what we do is we just ask people, do you ever stop and just realize step one, which is your life is becoming unmanageable? And if the answer to that is yes, then I think it's time to kind of turn your life over to a higher power other than yourself. And so I really ask people to kind of pause and just say, if you are really in charge of your life, how well are you doing right now? Maybe it's time to let somebody else take over.
I think the hardest part about that, and I don't care what, whether it's an addiction, maybe it's even a physical ailment. I think that the next thing I'm going to say transcends a lot of different topics is having some honest conversations with yourself. Maybe, it's asking yourself that tough question. Am I hurting? And if so, why? Because
Right.
if you're not asking the right question about why I'm running to the bottle, why I'm running to the gym, why I'm running to this, well, you're running from something. So what's the problem?
Yeah. And the short answer to that is the problem is really always you. Um, there's a Chance Pena song that I've heard, and it's called "The Mountain Is You." We have a sign on the wall in one of the rooms that says, "It ain't them." And when we're even going through recovery, there's no promise that life is suddenly going to get any easier, because life is life, and we have to get to
Right.
lifing. Um, my 2-year coin says that serenity is not relief from the storm, but it is the ability to cope through the storm and to find the serenity in the storm. And that's what it's about. These are not things that people can usually identify until there's been some kind of rock bottom that they've reached. That's just
Yeah.
the way that it works. And I think that that's God's plan for us. We are supposed to do hard things, and I think we learn some hard lessons, but it has to be hard. It's not something that we can identify as it's happening. It usually is something that we have to stop and pivot and question after we've had some things that are laying around us broken.
Yeah, I was thinking, I don't, if you watch the video, my intro video, I was hiking on the Camino de Santiago, right? That's where most of those pictures are from. And so there's a saying when you're hiking on the Camino, it's all uphill to Santiago. But life feels like that, right? It's all uphill until you're going through those downs, and the downs are just as rough, if not worse, than the uphills. But there's always a challenge around the corner. It's not always going to be flat, even ground, and that gets boring too. I don't know if you're a hiker or not, but just the
Yeah,
figurative. If you're like always hiking on even ground, the scenery is not very good.
right,
But the challenges are going to be there when when you're going through life. But having an unrealistic expectation that life is not going to be challenging is something we have to consider, because we're not properly preparing ourselves for those challenges when they happen. And the quickest answer is, well, I want to bail out. I want to drown that issue. Only you're compounding it by prolonging it instead of taking care of it.
right, right. Yeah, and and that happens at different stages for different people. Growing up the way I grew up and watching a father, who was an alcoholic, again, like I said, my determination to never be or emulate him, that wasn't really up to me either. That was somebody else up there. That was their plan of, basically, I'm not in control of my own destiny, and sometimes my destiny requires that I feel those painful experiences all over again. But this time it was through my own actions. I had fought the urge to ever try alcohol. I mean, I was a late bloomer. I didn't do it until I was 21.
Mhm.
And, for me, it wasn't a question ever, was I an alcoholic? Because the first time that I put alcohol to my lips, I knew without a doubt, because that was the freedom that I felt. The alcohol was my answer for not feeling quite right around other people, not feeling like I felt in, feeling like the way I grew up had been different, having to have the courage to walk into a room, talk to someone. That all changed with my answer to the problem, which is again me. The answer for me was alcohol. And I knew that I had the reaction, the wrong reaction. I didn't drink like normal people either. And there was never a doubt that I was an alcoholic from the minute that I started. And so,
So do you
my
think
life started to blow up.
did the avoidance perpetuate it then? I mean, did it just once alcohol crossed your lips, did that actually propel you to want to drink more?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. If you're questioning whether or not you have an alcohol problem, there is something that we talk about where that it's not only the allergy, as we call it, which allergy is just a term that means an abnormal reaction, but there is a craving. And for me, that craving, the minute that I took my first sip, I had found at that point, thus far, that was my spiritual go-to, and it made me feel complete. So absolutely, it was something for me that I could identify early on, and many drinkers can just drink, have two or three drinks, say I've had enough, and put it down. That's
Yeah.
because their brains respond to it normally. But an alcoholic brain actually has no suppression of those endorphins that are released, and you want more, more, and you crave it. And then spiritually, from that aspect, we obsess over it. We obsess of getting back to that comfort every day when the drink is not around.
Wow. Do you know I'm going to ask this weird question is that there are a lot of food products that have tall in it, right? They're alcohol-based sugars, erythritol, and all those others. Are you affected by those sugars as well because they're
hmm
alcohol-based? Have you
I
ever
am
have you
not.
ever noticed?
No, I haven't noticed that. And to be honest with you, I haven't heard a lot of people that have been. In my college days, I was involved in the restaurant industry, which is that's not recommended at all to anybody who's having any kind of addiction problem because there's something about that community that it flourishes. And I was very into cooking. It was not just the service side of it, but I got very interested in the culinary side. And culturally, with alcohol, it's so glamorized, and it's glamorized in food pairing. If you ever
Yeah.
get involved in the behind the scenes in a kitchen, alcohol is utilized a lot in cooking. And for me, I could taste it in food when it was an additive. And my mind and my body would pick up on that and it could kick off the craving. So today in recovery, I have
Uh,
to be, conscientious about certain things that I consume, or, how something's been prepared. Because if
yeah.
it's not prepared the right way and the alcohol's not burned off, I can taste it and I can actually feel it.
Well, I'm a very sensitive to erythritol. It's in a lot of the gums, so I have to. It's an additive in some of the candies. It my body does not like erythritol, but it's
Mm.
alcohol based. I don't have problems with alcohol per se, but I mean I can feel the difference with whatever process they use on erythritol. Um, I don't know. I just thought that would be an interesting concept for people who, if they are recovering, you have to be mindful about other products that are out there that are alcohol based, because you really need to read your ingredients and understand what those products are and what you're consuming because you are what you eat.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. No, it makes total sense. And then again, with people who have an addiction, uh, we typically are people that like to live life to the extreme. And because of the way, at least for me, my mind works about trying to constantly seek that comfort from, the alcohol itself. If I pick up on a taste, I mean, even a taste of it. it can set off a chain of obsession and craving. Uh, for instance, we have a saying too that non-alcoholic beer is really only meant for non-alcoholics. Uh, it would make sense, to most people that if I'm trying to recover and I'm out mowing the lawn, if I go buy a non-alcoholic beer, then I'm just kind of getting the flavor. What can it do? But it is a spiritual disease, and it's a mental obsession. So when I taste the non-alcoholic beer, that can set off an immediate disappointment with why am I not getting that buzz? Why am I not
Yeah.
getting to sit here and relax and get comfortable? Why do I still feel uncomfortable? Why do I still feel on edge? And then a real beer isn't going to hurt. And it starts that cycle in the head always.
So that goes back to something I was talking to my co-host on the Revivalist show earlier today. The biggest lies that hurt us the most are not the lies that other people tell us; it's the lies that we tell ourselves and believe. I mean, I talk about it in my book, right? I mean, it's not that we are our own worst enemies, but the things that we tell ourselves and believe are the things that are going to hurt us more. I mean, that's what you're explaining with the lie that, well, this one little drink is not going to hurt anything. That one sugar cookie, if you're on a diet, one piece of pie is not going to hurt anything. You're lying to yourself. You're believing the lie. Nobody's trying to put that in your mouth except for you, but you're lying to yourself and saying it's okay this time and it's not going to hurt anything. In the meantime, it's a slippery slope. It starts affecting everybody else around you.
Hmm. Yeah, and really that gets back down to acceptance and power, what we do have power over and what we don't. Uh, I have to say that I am powerless over alcohol, and for me to drink is to die. But proof, kind of in what you're talking about, of just the way that we lie to ourselves. I know that I'm constantly trying to fool myself before I try to fool anybody else. And
Yeah.
I can buy my own BS quite often. So I just turned 50. Love seafood. Again, I don't know if I mentioned it, but I love cooking. That was all part of it, kind of growing up too. And about a year ago, I cooked some shrimp, and I went outside, and it was a hot day like today, and I kind of started to itch right here, and I thought these mosquitoes they're really bad, and I kind of blew it off, and I mean, I looked in the mirror, they really got me. And a few months later, the same thing had happened. I'd eaten some shrimp, and I was outside, and I don't know, it didn't click in my head that there was a problem that wasn't the mosquitoes. And the third time this happened, for somebody who's obsessed with seafood, one of my favorite foods, I broke out in hives so badly, and I started looking it up. And yeah, you can develop a latent allergy to shrimp,
Oh,
in midlife. And I was so frustrated over this, from my cooking background and all of it. My wife goes, "Well, what are you going to do?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to keep eating shrimp. I'm just going to keep some Benadryl around."
uh-huh.
And she looked at me and she said, "That's the alcoholic nature in you right there." And it was so
Because
true. I
you're
have.
lying to yourself and you think that there's an escape hatch over there. Benadryl's the
Mhm.
escape hatch. It
Right.
didn't stop the allergy.
Nope, it didn't. And no amount of preparation, mentally, physically, whether I'm going to sit down and think I can just drink one beer or just eat one plate of shrimp, I'm not
Yeah.
going to beat it. I just have to accept that it's not for me.
So, I think one of the we you mentioned fear earlier. One of the things is I think for a lot of people, and I don't, I never quite figured out what Mark's fear was. I mean, because Mark was the life. He was the life of the room, right? People liked him for him, but for whatever reason, he ran to the bottle. But I think the hard part is flipping the switch in your own personal dialogue within yourself. And a friend of mine told me he had this revelation a few years ago because he's about 2 years sober now, I think, as well. That he had somebody asked him, when, when did somebody criticize you for being the person that you are sober? I think I'm
Right.
saying it right. That, people liked him for him. It wasn't because he was drinking the alcohol. He didn't have to, sometimes just acknowledging who you are. People like you for who you are, not for the made up person you are because you're drinking something. People
Right.
around you attending the events because they like who you are as a person. And that to me is the most genuine side of things, that if we as a culture could get used to just living in our own skin and not running, put the mask on, because that's what alcohol to me does. It puts the mask on to pretend that everything's okay. Even when I talked earlier about, my own home renovation stuff, the kids aren't there. I could put the mask on, pretend everything is okay, and remodel a room and do all that painting. For a little bit while I was in, but I wasn't hurting anybody, right? I was just in my own personal home and space doing it. But I think the hard part, we as a human race have to acknowledge and get over that thing that we have to pretend to be somebody else when people like us just for who we are.
Right. Yeah, and the thing is that the biggest critic to an alcoholic is themselves. Now, that's not always evident because let's face it, alcohol doesn't bring out the best side of me.
Mm.
Many people like me. Uh, but what's going on in there is that no matter how much validation you can give someone who's struggling with any kind of a self image, it's not going to get through until they contact, or at least they develop a relationship spiritually with who made them perfect as they are. No man is perfect, but God loves you the way that he intended you to be and the service that he intends for you to have with the world. It's when we get inside our own head and we think we could always do better, we're not doing it right. And for me, it was always trying to kind of figure out this whole spiritual thing. I didn't see any signs of God, so how did I know if I was even doing anything of value whatsoever? And in my story, it really took going through absolute rock bottom to get the gift of being forced to deal with my problem and getting a sponsor who set me down and said, your entire MO is fear. Everything about you, Russ, is fear. And I really had to sit down and analyze and do an inventory about just how much fear I had and how I masked that through overacting, being the life of the party, like you said, the sloppiest drunk that could be there. They weren't necessarily laughing because I was just so entertaining. They were kind of laughing at the end there because I was a fool. And he pointed out, he said 98% of all fears that human beings have never come to fruition. And we've got to learn to live in the now, not yesterday, and not what could or couldn't happen tomorrow.
Well, I think the tendency is to catastrophize everything, the worst case scenario every single time. But if it's not happening, then it's not happening. Don't let fear drive all of those decisions, because sometimes, man, the doors that God allows to close are saving you from some grief. Believe me, saving you from grief, that he's gonna, hey, I've got something better for you planned. Just wait. It's not going to be what you expect on the path that you expect, but I've got something better. Just be patient and walk with me. I think that out of everything that I have learned, this has been a tough journey. Never in a million years that I think I'd be raising 4 kids with no dads around. You know, this has been tough. I mean, because they passed away in 2014 and 2015. 2 of them are in the 30s, the other 2 are almost to their mid 20s. This has been tough to do this by myself, and yet I'm still standing, and still I haven't let I haven't succumbed to some challenges that might otherwise take me out. I say that all because I could have very well looked at all of this as fear, driving everything driven by fear, and succumb to the same very thing that took Mark out, the alcohol side of things. I feel very
Right.
blessed that God has kept me on the straight and narrow, um, going through things. In your journey, and you mentioned having veterans come in, and participate in the discussions in your groups. What has been the one thing that has been critical for helping them on the success side of things? Because I'm a firm believer the community is really the answer. If we only are ever leaving all answers to fix all of our problems as veterans is the VA, then we're actually lying to ourselves about that. The community has lots of answers there. And even we talked about it before the show, of some of those experiences post World War I and II, and subsequently, the community has been the biggest response mechanism to help veterans come back home successfully.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's when I'm sitting in the rooms and I discover somebody is a veteran, number one, it's almost inevitable that as they start to open up, which is a little slower with some of the veterans I've noticed, there's a
Okay.
shell there that's hard for them to drop because they're coming again from a world of self-reliance, systemic ways of approaching everything, and now they're back home. They're dealing with what's in their head. They're dealing with the family that missed them, reintegration in general, getting to know the kids, and then they've developed this problem too. Once they do finally start to let a little bit of a guard down and realize, I need help. I don't have power over this. I do hear the VA start to come up. And I think there's a sense of betrayal that they feel by acknowledging that the system in place doesn't always serve them. Now, this could just be my imagination, but it's something that I've seen a few times. And for us in the community that sees a veteran that comes into the room, we have to tell them that's okay. Just like when I deal with someone who's had a bad religious experience, when they come in and they hear this is a program of finding a higher power, which you may or may not call God, these people are a little bit shell shocked on, you know, how much loyalty should I still have to this organization, this church, all of that, and who am I betraying? Uh, and sometimes they have to acknowledge that maybe they felt betrayed. It's okay. Right now is the time to not sit there and point the finger. It's the time to look inward with you and develop that kind of inner spiritual dialogue and develop that relationship with a higher power after you have admitted you have a problem, you're powerless over it, and it's okay to ask for help. But yeah, we hear it all the time.
So that whole power thing, the acknowledgement is the biggest critical part. I mean, it's almost like, the contract, you're writing right, you're signing the contract. I acknowledge I'm signing here. Having that self-reflection and accepting the self-responsibility is the hardest part out of all of that. Is that what I'm hearing?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's when when I'm running, and let's just use that figuratively, when we're running from ourselves, when someone actually calls you out on your BS, you can be angry, you can be hurt, but there's kind of a relief there. And I know that after enough times of being behind the wheel drunk, some of the best sleep that I got during my binges were in the jail the night that I got arrested. It was when we finally had to succumb, to relent, to admit defeat. Only then, when you're on your back looking up, then can you see something that could actually help you.
the figurative bottom of the hill. The
Hmm.
bottom is the toughest. Like when I was talking about going hiking those Camino mountains, the downhill is worse than going uphill
Hmm.
because that perpetuation of falling until you get to the bottom. That's momentum goes and more things come with you when you're going down versus building up to go up. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, when you are at your rock bottom, then you can either sit there in the shame of it all, or you can kind of smile and know that all you can do is build from here. And so that's why we tell people that if it is giving you a problem and you have your innermost self telling you it's a problem, because we're not always going to listen to family, we're not always going to listen to the boss. But when it finally becomes that voice, your innermost self, you're hearing it, that's a beautiful thing. Because if you're having that rock bottom, and I don't mean, can't pay your bills, legal problems, but when you truly hit that rock bottom spiritually and you have to ask for help, that's when going back up the hill and building upon that really begins.
So I know when we talked last week, we talked about culture as a big thing. It's something I talked about earlier, even dealing with the circus last night. The culture, the alcohol culture, and I'm not trying to take away from alcohol existing. There is a time and a place for it, but how do we? What's a good way we can start changing the culture? I see so many industries, whether it's the military or veterans. We have all these different, the local VSO veteran service watering hole, is a bar. We have different, whether it's the sales industry, whether it's whatever. So many of these deals are built around alcohol. Daryl and I were talking earlier today about even the show Dallas. Remember the Dallas TV show? So much was built around alcohol in almost every scene, drinking, some a whiskey or whatever, right? So much of it is always the alcohol culture surrounds us. How do we change that, or just be able to operate? I'm going to use, how do you operate in the culture that is so filled with references to alcohol?
Right, right. And here's the thing, the big problem with alcohol is anytime we watch the Super Bowl, nobody pays $1 million to run an ad for heroin.
Yeah.
It's not there. So I mean, we have one of the most destructive substances to families and to health, leading to a lot of legal problems. That is taxable. It's totally legal. It's glamorized. It's glamorized in movies. It's glamorized in all culture. And the more stress you have, you can always rely that there's going to be a commercial on TV that shows you how to reward yourself after a hard day's worth of work.
Yeah.
To know this drink in your hand in so many ways, excuse me, validates your worthwhile. And it shows the drink as the end goal. And when you were talking about the experience that you had of taking the kids to the circus, uh, you know, if you were to talk to me about having a stressful day at work and being able to come home and not pour a glass of wine versus me having to take the kids years ago to the circus, I promise you, me taking the kids to the circus was going to get me drunker faster because, our lives, our
No, I
family
get
lives, now
it.
you get it. when
I
I
get it. I
when I
mean,
post,
it's this
yeah,
dichotomy. I got to deal with the kids at the circus, and they're going to be screaming, and they're going to be crazy, and we're going to hype up on sugar. And the only way I can get through it is to have a hard drink while I'm sitting there.
yeah, and the sad part of that, and something that I've had to learn in my program of recovery is, that is proof right there that the addiction has a spiritual component to it.
Yeah,
I mean, look at that. If I have to drink more just to be in the company of my kids, my wife, the people that supposedly love me, and that I love. And that's not uncommon. You see that in the
yeah,
rooms a lot. That's where we are most uncomfortable, and I don't think that that's where God wants us to be. It's
for
about being
sure.
able to sit down and just be and to have value. If our organizations, either work sales groups, example, rather than going out drinking, military, certain businesses focus on the family, how the family's doing.
Yeah.
And one of the things that in Alcoholics Anonymous that I was shocked about, early in recovery, you don't think you're ever going to enjoy life again without a drink in your hand. It's all I know, but you only know what you don't know. And when I started seeing that there were camping trips, people were floating the river as you did, sober, whole communities that were going out rock climbing, that were going to dinner together, sitting in restaurants where that you would normally order a margarita and everybody's ordering a mocktail or a tea and having good conversation. Community is there. And if you think that it's becoming a problem, even if it's not full blown rock bottom yet, I would encourage you to kind of maybe step into some of the rooms and seeing what kind of sober communities are out there. And there's a lot of them, because there's a life without a glass in your hand. There really is.
I think it's a slippery slope, because we get back to telling the lies to ourselves. It's just one drink. It's just, it's just only over time. And maybe that's what Mark thought, it's just a drink. And I did not ever like it when he would ask me, "Can you stop at the liquor store?" My wanting to stop at the liquor store to get me something meant something different for me versus what he was going to take it as, and go through a whole fifth in a night. I mean, because he would finish the whole bottle of Crown easy. I mean, he'd want the half gallon. That's what he preferred. If I'd get that whole or whatever big size that is, it was a lot. It would take me probably 3 years to go through that versus, and I'm just not a Crown person, but I'd go for the chocolate liquor that I could put a little bit of vodka in. I would be happy with that. I mean, it's just our approach to what alcohol would do in our life was different. I had a different motivation than what his experience was. His was the escapism, and that was very tough.
Well, and yeah, and it definitely was probably the escapism, but also too spiritually, and again, this is a chemical imbalance in the head, but there are spiritual components to it also. When you have someone that drinks the way that I drank, I had someone sit down and say, "Well, you never did really fill that God-sized hole when you kept pouring that into you, did you?" And that's the thing. There's nothing wrong with anybody out there who can drink like a normal person. I envy them, and every alcoholic wants to be them, but we have to accept that we're not.
So
So,
that's weird
yeah.
that you bring this up because God has always been a huge part of my life. So my alcohol side has been like this versus God is this. I mean, I have had a very healthy relationship with God all these years. So my dabbling in the worldly side of things has been pretty minimal. But that was the weird thing that I remember talking with Mark about was him as an alcoholic. And I had called him one time. This was when after we had separated, and I was like, "You have like the devil talking on your shoulder about all this stuff." And he goes, "Yeah, the only person I hear is you." But then he was flipping and saying that I was this holy roller because I was going to church, and God was my answer to get through all of this. It always has been through all of these trials that I've gone through: car wreck, two divorces, both guys passing away. God has always been my answer. It has not been alcohol. I'm not saying it didn't ever become a occasional answer. I'm not going to say I didn't ever get drunk. I have, but I've typically done it at home and it wasn't hurting anybody. So I don't know.
Well,
I
yeah,
just
it's no, I totally hear you. And the funny thing is that in the 1930s, when the psychologist Carl Jung, he was trying to deal with some alcoholics that would come in, and the psychiatric community realized that this was a hopeless disease. There was no pop psychology that could seem to cure the alcoholic. And he had heard about some of the development that was going on with the Oxford group and with the early formation of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he wrote a letter to Dr. Bob and to Bill Wilson because he had heard about the program that they were putting together. And he started referring some of the alcoholic patients that were coming to them to look into the program that they were developing. And what he had come up with the conclusion of, and he wrote this in a letter to Dr. Bob, he said that he had felt that the alcoholic was trying to have some kind of spiritual connection and that they were constantly chasing that. And he knew that he could lose his license if he tried to even suggest anything like that. So he took great risk to recommend that the 12-step program might work. And as it started to, we look at it and we realize just how much turning your will and your life over to a higher power. And again, we emphasize this is a spiritual program. It's not a
right,
religious program. So if you
right.
come in, if you have a resentment against the church, set that aside because this isn't about the church. It's about inner self, inner peace.
That's so interesting you bring that up because I don't know if you are aware, the Revivalist radio show on Mondays at 3 with myself and my co-host, Daryl Hartley. We talk about kind of this very thing in a way that, it's a veteran ministry geared towards moral injury healing and recovery. We're talking about
Mhm.
soul repair when you're replacing God with alcohol. You're replacing
Mhm.
God in your life with whatever addiction it is that you have. Could be shopping, could be drugs, could be sex, could be whatever else. You're replacing that hole that you talked about a while ago, that hole of God. You're replacing him in your life with something else and expecting different results in the healing and recovery side of things. I don't know. This is great food for thought to lead into Monday because we're doing our Genesis recap. So have about a minute left. I think it's what the time says. About a minute before the closing video. What's one question I should have asked but didn't ask?
Oh, goodness. Well, I mean, we've talked a lot about, spiritually. I think maybe you should have asked what's it look like now and what's that walk look like now. And here's what I always try to tell people. Um, when we turn off the alcohol, we still have that hole. And
Yeah.
I was a dry drunk for 2 years without the program, a 12-step program. My blood pressure was through the roof. My pulse rate was at 105 at rest, 2 years sober. And I had a
Wow.
doctor tell me, you can't get your pulse rate down, you're going to have a pacemaker. When I started into AA, within 4 months, my blood pressure went to normal. Nothing had changed in the drinking, except I started feeling a connection with God. And I don't see God in the headlights. I haven't had a burning bush moment yet. What I tell people about this, it's all about listening, doing the next right thing. When you don't know what else to do, you can help. You can walk over. If you're completely powerless over everything, you can offer to help somebody somehow, some
Yeah.
way. And when I'm doing the next right thing, if I adjust my rearview mirror and I've just kept going, I see God in the rearview mirror. I see that He nudged me during the right fork in the road. And so when we don't know what to do, just listen to your innermost self and pray about it and keep on driving. And you're going to see God in that rearview mirror.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us, Russ. Happy to have you on the show again. I look forward to watching your journey, and may God walk with you every step of the way. You're such a joy. So, anyways, thank you all for joining us today on the From Pain to Purpose radio show here on Military Broadcast Radio, letting our veterans' voices be heard. Y'all have a great week.
Hi, I'm Beaker with Military Broadcast Radio TV. We're your virtual MWR, bringing veterans radio, podcasts, gaming, animation, 3D printing, and a community that never leaves you behind. Download our Roku or mobile app today.
Wisdom to share if you listen this week, so pull up a chair and stay for a spell. We're heading down a trail where good stories dwell.